Hi, Djuka.
Hi,
I'm
James.
James Bach. We've known each other a long time. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
So I'm a software tester out of Milwaukee, and I've been in test lead and management positions for the last 4 years. And in those 4 years, I've been adapting session-based test management to some of the contexts that I've worked in. So,
Okay. Can you describe session-based test management for viewers who may not know what it is?
Yeah, it is a activity-based test management framework method for, basically conducting testing in whatever context you find yourself in. So it is based on the concept of a session, and within a session, we perform certain activities that we would consider to be testing. We, as in the tester, and those activities are based on a mission that we thought about before performing that testing. So, sort of in a nutshell, that is what it's about. We also report on the testing, and if we so choose, we measure some of that time in a set of metrics. And we also debrief on the testing that we do as a team. So a lead with some testers, or senior testers and junior testers together, that sort of thing.
You said it was an activity-based method. Am I right in thinking that activity-based means, as opposed to an artifact-based approach where you're counting test cases and you focus on test cases, and these documents, these texts, which are thought to represent testing? Instead, an activity is something a tester does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so testing itself is not just merely counting test cases and calling that good testing. Testing is a a thinking activity, a sense-making activity, something where you have to make judgment calls and decisions, and where you won't really know everything that you're going to find out at the start of a session, for example. So you have to be able to adapt to those changes and adapt your strategy as you go as well. So all of those things require critical thinking and a bit more than just pumping out test cases and marking them done or not done, whatever that means. So yeah, testing is an activity. And so when we say activity-based, that's what we mean. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in a testing effort or in a session that we can't necessarily fully encode in a document of any type, but we can definitely give it our best try with some good reporting, and then maybe some other supporting documentation that comes out of that session about a system, for example, or a set of cases that you would like to automate or something like that.
How long have you been using this approach?
So it's been since 2019 now that I've been doing this. And I started at Northwestern Mutual with a team of 2 testers. And this was very shortly after I took my first RST class, so I was very new to the whole thing. And it was just something that I read in the appendices in the articles that were provided to us at the end of the course. And so I just thought it was interesting and maybe not that hard to adapt or implement. And I really just make sure that, I don't try to do it all at once. I try to go slow with it and kind of do it halfway, really, and get really good at one component at a time, and then kind of put it all together as we went along. So that was the first iteration of SBTM on our team.
Have you been following the method as it was originally designed?
Not always. I mean, sometimes you just can't, or you don't have the enough time to do that. For example, the metrics gathering and the learning of how to think about dividing up your time within a session. Often I find that not to be necessarily something that people need to know right away, as they're getting into, first chartering, for example, and learning how to do all of that. I think that's more important at that point. And then like doing maybe better reporting, knowing when they're writing too much versus not testing enough, that kind of thing. All of that takes time. So the numbers are kind of secondary to me. So that's one example of how I've done it.
In the original method that my brother and I designed, we thought that debriefings were very important, and we said they should be done on the same day, but you don't do it that way.
It really depends. So if there are people that are new to the method, or like if it's a new team and I've just introduced it and, we're kind of trying it out, and they're new to reporting and all of that, then we'll try to do it every day. But then as people get more into things and they just get better at writing down what they're doing, so I can see from a report rather than maybe having to meet with them. That helps, and then I can give like written feedback on the comments of a report, for example. So like a written debrief, for example. And then the big stuff we save for FaceTime, for talking to each other. And then there's some weeks where we just can't make the time. For example, with like my last team, we had a lot of people working on different teams with different features that were being developed. And there was just a lot of times where we couldn't find that time to actually have that meeting as a team. So those are all obstacles that you kind of have to think about as you do this and be flexible with.
So, I implemented SBTM recently at a client, and I found that the debriefings every day were really hard to do, but I also found I didn't need to do them, because even though they're quite important, because people keep getting the session reports wrong when they first are doing them. They have notes that don't explain the things that they need to be explained. They leave certain fields unfilled out that I need in order to do the metrics, for instance, which in our case, for that client, the reason we were doing it was because of the metrics. The client wanted us to count test cases. We refused to count test cases. So this was the compromise, right? This allowed us to do what we wanted to do, and the management would get their metrics, and the metrics wouldn't be terrible metrics. They'd be okay. But what I found is that we implemented it in Jira, and I found that I could just review all of the session reports in Jira, put comments in, follow up using Jira's mechanisms with people to make sure that they fix the sheets. And I found that we only needed to have a meeting once a week to talk about the trends. Like, oh, I'm noticing that a lot of people doing this. Okay, stop doing that. Or, how does it feel to do this technique? Are you feeling like it's too onerous? Is it too much paperwork? Do we need to change something? Another thing that we learned right toward the beginning was management was looking at our metrics and saying, well, is this good or bad? Like it says that there's been 5 hours of sessions that was done on Wednesday. Is that a lot? Is it a little? So we found a simple way to deal with that is to give management a rule of thumb that each tester would average half a day in sessions and half a day not in sessions. And that allowed us to have a little dashed line and then count up all the session sheet times. And as long as it was above a certain amount of minutes per day, management wouldn't ask any questions about it because we told them we spend about half our day doing session-based testing and half the day in meetings or doing other things that aren't session related or relatable. And so it calmed down management and it gave the testers a basic kind of target. And I tried to set it kind of low. I actually expected them to do more than half their day in sessions, but I thought half a day would be a nice, easily obtainable target and they wouldn't get too obsessed about all that. Have you found anything like that, a similar experience where management looks at the metrics, or were you just not using the metrics?
I was using them more for my own use and for practice and learning. The management really didn't care about that kind of thing, I guess.
So you didn't implement this as a defense against management demanding.
Oh, I did.
A test case. Oh, a different kind of defense. Oh, in case they ever did. I see.
I like to preempt situations.
Right. I see.
That's why I even did session-based test management, because I realized that I needed to have something that's good, because I saw kind of the writing on the wall of the, other methods that I didn't want to do. And so I was like, I'm just going to start doing this and see how we go. And I will have things written down and documented, and we'll just go along. And so that allowed me to do that work, and kind of have people off my back, and that worked out pretty well, actually. So
yeah, okay. I'm glad to hear that. That is one of the reasons why we created this, was to give a little bit of formality or to protect the gooey inner center of testers doing whatever they felt they should be doing at any given moment.
Yeah, I think that worked out. I think it also depends on the manager that is implementing it, and the pressure. Like, can you handle the pressure from upper management? Because sometimes they will want you to do things that you don't want to do, like count test cases. So how do you reconcile that with wanting to do something else? I think a lot of people struggle with that. So this is a good way if you're in a situation where there's like no expectations yet, to just start doing something where you are, giving yourself a little bit of an insurance breathing space there.
So one more big question. How has it been getting other testers to use this method?
I mean, it really depends on the tester. Some testers were cool with it and willing to try. Others were not into it at all. And I had trouble with getting people to write a report, for example, or want to take notes during testing.
Well, what did they want to do instead?
Nothing, I guess. I don't know. Like report a bug and call it good, which to me is not good enough. And I just don't buy into this whole thing like, oh, I don't have to show my work. Like, I think you do. And everyone else does, like coding programmers like actually have their code to show for what they've done. The other functions also have things that are more tangible and visible about their work. So this is a way to make that happen for testing that's not so heavy on the documentation, but still gives us like good information that we can use in our project.
I think it helps testers have real self-respect for what they do once they learn how to do it.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of resistance comes from testers just not having the skill of describing their testing, not having the skill. They've never developed the skill of making notes and describing their test strategy. So they just have to learn that. And then once they know that, then they kind of feel, good about it. And I love sharing my notes about my testing with people. I want to get questions about my testing. And I think there's a lot of people who feel like they're afraid to have scrutiny because then it will be revealed that they never really knew how to test.
I mean, maybe that's it. I don't know, but I've definitely tried to make debrief a place where it's okay to be that person. Like, it's totally fine to not know. But also a place where you do take criticism. And, sometimes I think that's hard for people to hear. Like, when you are writing this, what else did you think about, feel, question? I don't want to just know this worked. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I want more detail. Yeah. And so kind of guiding them on that way. It takes a while with people. Like, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's 2-3 months, I think, is like a good time to skill up on the test reporting and the note taking. But I just really think that good reporting is built on good note taking. So if you can figure out your note taking skills, and how you take notes during testing, then you can translate that information into a test report of any kind, really. So.
Well, I also think you need a good mental model of testing, because when I say, what did you do to test? Mm-hmm. It's possible that someone will go, I looked at the product and I looked for problems. What's there to say? And I want to say, well, what about coverage? What about oracles? What sort of heuristics did you use? Which risks were you looking at? Which risks were you not looking at? Did you use tools? What kind of tools? Tell me about your test data. Tell me about the kinds of bugs that you probably would miss using the method that you used. And tell me why that doesn't matter in this case. Say something about any of those things. And that's the subject matter of test strategy. But if you're not aware of that ontology, of the difference between an oracle and a coverage, for instance, coverage is something you look at. Oracle is how you know whether there's a bug or not, and these are two separate things. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't really think about your test data, you just entirely think in terms of functionality and not in terms of the configuration or settings or data or situation in which you are doing that. And then this is all overwhelming. So maybe we have to teach people to test. Then note-taking as a separate skill that combines with that knowledge of testing.
So I think a lot of people that are starting out or even have had a few years of experience due to what I think is just bad like resources out there for learning about what testing is, have this whole different notion about testing that once you kind of come in and you tell them and ask them all those questions, it can feel very overwhelming for somebody who has been kind of chugging along doing this other thing, right? So having a lot of patience to explain a lot of these concepts through debriefing is pretty powerful, I think, with this framework. And then if you have such a situation where you have testers that haven't ever heard of a word oracle, for example, or heuristic, you can take the time during that debrief to explain those things on a more consistent basis, so they start understanding that through their work. So it's not just this like theoretical thing they heard about once, twice, you know. But again, it's all about, I think, balancing that information, like how much you're giving them at a time, because it can easily be like, oh, there's just too much here and I'm overwhelmed. And then
I do find it can overwhelm people to just say, you have to use this method now, and just throw the whole thing at them. One of the first experiences we had with getting people to use this approach is the entire team resigned. So then we had to hire a new team. And this time we said, hey, we're going to use this method, so don't take the job if you're not into it. So then that team really got into it. And then the next team that I trained in doing this, I found out that one of the members of the team was going home at night and testing at night just so that she wouldn't have to take notes. It was just that taking notes was so traumatic, apparently. So it was so stressful.
I just don't understand that, because when you have a session that takes a good amount of time, it's really important for me to take notes, because I get lost really easily.
And that's how I feel.
What happened? I forget a bug that happened that I maybe wanted to write up later. Like, I'm a forgetful person. Writing it down really works for me. And then if I had to interrupt my testing time, or if I had to like come back to it the next day, for example, I have my notes to come back to. I can be like, oh, okay, this is where I left off. Yeah. So it just takes away all that stress. Just one little skill during your testing, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent for it. And maybe like, if you don't like note taking during your testing, maybe testing's not for you. I don't know.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel. Although I definitely want to work with people. I want to work with people to get them into it. I don't necessarily feel we have to throw them into the deep end, but I do expect them to come along, you know, to be open to.
If you have people who are just kind of stagnated, like they haven't taken that leap of like, okay, this is my procedure. This is how I'm going to conduct testing. Have all my stuff ready, and I'm also going to take notes. Like,
so well, to some degree, you know, the traditional test case method is kind of like a shield for people. Mm-hmm. It's like you look at this test case report. I'm going to give you a spreadsheet of my list of test cases. It's going to say pass and fail. And you agree not to ask any questions. And then I can do anything I want behind the scenes.
And why does management need to know anything about what we did, or like, or what we found, or what we even think the risks are, or whether we even
a lot of times management doesn't even want to know. You know, it's just people like you and me stirring up trouble because we want to do a good job. And management doesn't care. Testers, a lot of testers don't care. Why are we coming along and saying it's so important to do this? Well, thank you for this this interview, Djuka. I want to say that when I first came up with this method, I was careful to tell people this is not a best practice. This is an idea that I have. My brother and I have this idea. We've tried it. We're excited about it. We think that anyone who wants to use this idea should understand why we designed it the way we did, and then they should change it to fit whatever they think works for them. And the first time I really took you seriously, frankly, Djuka, was when I heard you changed my method. Because then I said, I'm dealing with a craftsperson. I'm dealing with a serious professional. If you have enough respect for this method that you will rethink it, then I have to pay attention. If you're putting it in a frame and mounting it on your wall, that doesn't mean anything. Anyone can do that. That's easy. It's easy to follow. It's easy to ignore.
I guess I just really don't like being like told exactly how to do something. I like being given like maybe a little guide, like a model or a method.
That's the spirit.
You know,
that's the spirit of context-driven testing.
And that's also
we decide for ourselves.
Right. You can really just figure it out, and if it doesn't work, then you don't have to do it. And that's the other thing I try to tell people is like, you don't have to do this. Like if you're a manager in a team, you can try it out and maybe it doesn't work for you. And that's the other thing. It's not a best practice. So
that's what I tell people that where I'm introducing this. I'm saying, I want you to try this. I want you to try this. If it doesn't work and you tell me why it doesn't work and you tell me you have an alternative that's going to solve the problem we have, do that. Right. Because ultimately we have to work with your agency. I know that I can't get good work out of you if I say, shut up, erase your mind, replace it with my mind. I don't have the energy to tell you what to do. Even if you would let me tell you what to do, I can't do it because I got other things to do. So I need to work with people's agency. And that means find your own way. But that doesn't mean I don't care what you do. So a lot of times people hear context driven and they think it means, well, anyone can just do anything they want to do. Well, but you have to be accountable for that.
Yeah, there needs to be a reason for why you're doing something.
Yes, that's you need to be solving the problem. You don't just say, well, I just choose to follow whatever the ISTQB says because you said it's context driven. And the big part of the context is that's what I feel like I want to do. So therefore, I'm context driven because I just feel like I want to do this. No, if you are accountable, if you can understand and explain the dynamics of why you chose this, why is that a better way to do things, then you're being responsible.
I think as a manager and as a lead, like the method has really made me closer to the product, even when I'm not testing it. So because through the document, like the test report and the verbal, like the debriefing from the testers, all of that together in our discussion, I have a better idea of the state of the product, or maybe a technique that I didn't know that they used and learned that I can, use too. So it's about learning from each other as well. I think it really helps set that foundation of like making learning happen all the time. And just makes things more fun if you're into it. But, if you have a problem with the reporting, really is what people have the most problem with, because they have a problem, I guess, maybe also with their skill level, and they don't want you to see it. You're going to have a little bit more of a struggle, but it's all with an open mind. And if you have an open mindset and are into learning it, just do it. Like you'll come out with learning something, at least, even if you don't keep doing it. All right. Learn something. So,
well, this has been wonderful. Thank you for being my first interview.
Cool.
Yes, I'm going to interview some different people that I admire, and I'm gonna put the videos up there. But this has been what I hoped it would be. Thank you, Djuka.